Hi, good evening, everyone. It is 7 o'clock, and we're just waiting for a few more participants to log in. So just bear with us. Just a couple more minutes. We'll give people to join us, okay? So just bear with us. Thanks for coming.
Yes.
All right, everyone. It's time to begin. Welcome to the second session of Unit 1 in the Growing Brain series of trainings developed by 0 to 3. The title of today's session is Understand Neuroplasticity and the Role of Early Experiences. So my name is Anna Avalos Atkinson, and along with my colleague Natasha Erise, we want to welcome you to today's session. We hope that it is interesting and informational for you, and we hope that you take away some new concepts, hopefully, as well as positively reinforcing some previous knowledge probably on the topic. So a little bit about each of us. I myself have worked in the early childhood field for about 30 years, a little over 30 years. I do have experience in private school settings as well as Head Start programs. I have been in the classroom Been a classroom teacher, 4-year-olds, loved it. I've also been a supervisor for a couple of agencies. Currently work at the ELC of Broward as a coach. I currently coach for teachers in the VPK classrooms. I support them in improving their interactions with the children in their day-to-day. Something neat about me, I think, I'm a pet lover. I love kitty cats. I have 5 of them at home, and they keep me super busy. So my friend Natasha Risse,
Hi, my name is Natasha Elise. Thank you, Anna.
you're
Um,
welcome.
Thank you for saying Elise, Anna.
My pleasure.
I know right now we'll be very happy with the pronunciation.
Great.
Um, I worked in the early childhood education field for the past 15 years. I taught Head Start and VPK students as well. I am a class observer and class certified trainer for infant and toddlers. My favorite quote is that education is the most powerful weapon which one can use to change the world. It is by Nelson Mandela. And I love to sing and dance. Thank you
Awesome.
for joining us, and we are ready to go.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you for joining us. And hopefully, as we said, it's going to be a great ride for you. So we have a lot of interesting information to share with you tonight. So let's get
Yeah,
started.
buckle up.
All right. So just a few tips, webinar housekeeping tips. So you'll see the panel either on the right side or the left side of your screen. And if you want to open or close the panel, you have to click on the orange rectangle with the white arrow. We have a question chat box that you can click on also to type in any questions or comments you may have throughout the training. We definitely encourage you to put in any comments or any doubts or any questions that you may have of any of the content that we present tonight. Your certificate will be emailed to you after the session. To download the handouts, we have 4 very good handouts for you tonight. You have to click the triangle that says handouts. Click on each of the document as you see it, the panel open up, and it'll allow you then to access each of them and download them directly into your computer so you can print them out or save them as a document, okay, to access at a later time. Also, really quick, attendance and credits. Just a quick review, the ELC trainings are for in-service hours only. Your training certificate, again, will be emailed to you within 24 hours after the conclusion of the webinar to the email address that you used when you registered for this session. So in order to be marked as attended, you must log into the computer or download the GoToWebinar app on your smartphone. Just calling in does not register your attendance, and you will not receive a certificate or be marked as attended. So if you can't see us, then we can't see you. And also, upon registering for this webinar, you received a pretest of 3 questions. When you complete this webinar, you will receive a post-test with the 3 questions along with a training evaluation of 5 questions. And we kindly ask that you please complete them to ensure that you receive your certificate of attendance. Okay, so we want to share just some information about the 0 to 3 organization and their work in the early childhood education field. So 0 to 3 works to ensure that babies and toddlers benefit from the family and community connections critical to their well-being and development. They believe that healthy connections help build babies' brains. I'm sure you have already heard also that neuroscientists have documented that the earliest days, weeks, and months of life are a period of unparalleled growth when many brain cell connections are made. Research and clinical experience demonstrates that the earliest relationships and experiences a child has with parents and other caregivers dramatically influences brain development, social, emotional, and cognitive skills, and for future health and success in school life. So with that said, 0 to 3 supports parents, professionals, and policymakers in gaining information, giving them knowledge and tools that they can access through the website, and helping to create a network of parents and professionals in the field. So I invite you to log into their website to get more information on the work that they do. The link is right there. It's 0to3.org, and you can find out a little bit more about them. So really quickly, just an overview of the Growing Brain. So 0 to 3 actually developed this training curriculum some years ago. It's a training curriculum that has been designed for early childhood professionals. It does focus on development of children ages newborn to 5 years old. It focuses on the brain and its role on early development. It links the brain, the body, and behavior. It focuses on affective neuroscience, which is the science of emotions and the brain. And finally, it addresses areas such as the structure and functions of the brain, factors and experiences that affect the brain, and connections between the brain, language, development, and sensory functioning. It is made up of 7 units. So here are the units. So with tonight's session, we will be completing Unit 1, which is the basics. For those of you who participated in a session we had last Monday, that was the first half of Unit 1. And tonight we'll be doing the second half of Unit 1. Unit 2 is the factors affecting brain growth and development. Unit 3 is communication and language development. 4 is cognition and executive functions. 5 is social emotional development. 6 is understanding behavior. And 7 is everyday play. So as I stated last week, for those of you who were with us, we will be presenting on each of the units every month. So please log into the ELC Broward calendar of events in the main page of our website to register. We love having you join us. For today's session, we will review the second half, as I said, of Unit 1, which covers understanding neuroplasticity and the role of early experiences. So the objectives for tonight's session is, number 1, that you will understand how nerve cells communicate and connect. You'll understand neuroplasticity and the role of early experiences in making connections between areas of the brain. And we will review ways that providers can support healthy brain development. Okay, so again, today is a continuation of last week's session. So we will continue to look at how the brain grows and develops from conception to 5 years old and describe the main parts of the brain and their functions, as well as explore how you as a provider can support healthy brain development in early childhood when the brain is the most plastic or receptive to change. All right, so again, for those of you who joined us last week, we stated at the end of the session that we wanted to give you a reflection activity to kind of help summarize all the content from that session. Now, we understand that it's a lot of information and it's very jargony, very technical, but it all comes together. It all makes sense. So we wanted to at least try to make it more engaging and interesting for you. So I hope that we were kind of successful. So we asked you, as a reflection of last session and in preparation for today's session, we asked that you think of a catchy slogan to advertise and promote a part of the brain and its function. So we're going to ask now if anyone that was here last week wants to go ahead and share. It would be great. Remember, so we talked about the different parts of the brain, the 4 different lobes: the parietal lobe, the frontal lobe, the occipital lobe, and the temporal lobe. So if anyone has any catchy slogans, I welcome you to put them in the chat. And let's see, I want to share this one that says, in reference to the temporal lobe, don't let your emotions take over. Keep your temporal lobe in control, right? Because the temporal lobe, for those of you who were here last week, has to do with emotions, right? One of its functions is dealing with emotions. So that's catchy. And this other one, let's paint the rainbow with the occipital lobe. Exhibit your best creative qualities. Occipital lobe has to do with colors and shapes, right? So that's kind of catchy too. Just as a reminder, we have some handouts in the handout section of the panel so that you can access them. And one of the handouts that is very good for you to have is the participant guide to this unit. Last week, we shared the first half, and this week we're sharing the second half with you, okay? And it includes lots of the information on the different parts of the brain and their functions, okay? Excellent. So let's continue. And we're going to try to give you a reflection activity during every session, at the end of every session, to kind of keep it going and keep you connected and to help you reflect on the content of the session. All right, so let's continue. So again, some of you might recognize this video. We did play it during last week's session, but we wanted to share it with you again because it really does connect both halves of this unit. It contains information on how the brain develops, which we reviewed last week, as well as information and visuals on brain connectivity. I'm very big on visuals, which we are going to discuss today. So I invite you to jot down any information that sounds interesting to you, and we'll go over some of the main points on the other side of the video. Okay, so give me a second while I launch it. The video is called Prenatal Brain Development. Here we go. Awesome. So how interesting was that? So again, for those of us who were together last Monday for the session that we had, a lot of the things that they speak of in the beginning of this video is kind of recapping what we talked about last week. And a lot of the neuron connections or connectivity is what we're going to talk about today. But there's a lot of interesting concepts, right? Who knew that all this was taking place even before the baby was born, right? So this is the prenatal part of brain development. And interesting to know also about the synaptic pruning, which is when some neurons are actually removed, even during the fetal period, during infancy, childhood, and even during adolescence, right? What were some of the things that you caught from the video, Natasha?
Yes, amazing how the gyra and the sulci in the cerebral, it does, it folds and wrinkles to help create a vast network system to help allow the brain to become highly flexible. That is so amazing thinking about the whole process that's taking place without even us knowing, and we're not even doing anything. It's
Yeah,
just
not even aware. Exactly. We're not even aware. Interesting. Lots of interesting information there. So I
yeah.
hope that you all were able to catch and jot down some of the most interesting points of that video. Okay. And
And how
some of the information will make more sense as we move on with the presentation.
yes.
All right. So let's continue. Okay. So we'll move into the part of brain connectivity. Okay. So, so in this section, we are going to talk about how the nerve cells communicate with each other and make connections that form networks. So during the last week's session, we talked about one important way that the brain grows in size or volume. The other way it grows is through these connections made within the brain between the nerve cells or neurons, right? Which is something that we saw on the video. Today, we'll see how this growth in brain connections takes place. We know that the rate at which these connections are made is astounding. Scientists estimate that the brain is making around 1 million new neural connections per second in the first few years of life. Is that amazing? 1 million new neural connections per second in the first few years of life. That's unbelievable. And this picture here is an illustration of what the network of neurons looks like. So neurons communicate or connect with one another by sending nerve impulses from one neuron to another, forming long chains. So these chains eventually create complex networks. The more often the chain of neurons communicates or sends impulses to each other, the stronger the chain becomes, making faster, stronger networks that pass information between areas of the brain. So what does this mean for us working with young children? That means that the experiences that young children have in the world stimulate the neurons to communicate with each other, forming those connections. The experiences we provide young children are literally helping to develop their brains. So we'll talk about how the brain is plastic in the early years in a little bit. But now we'll first look at brain cells, neurons, and how it is that they communicate. So let's look at the neuron. We're going to look at its parts and how it communicates with other neurons. So at one end of the neuron is a cell body with hair-like extensions. We saw that on the video as well. And what are these called? They're called dendrites. And their job is to be available to bring in signals called neurotransmitters from neighboring cells. Once the dendrite receives the message from a neighboring cell, it triggers the cell body to create a nerve impulse. Okay, so you see the two arrows going down the body of the neuron. That's the direction of the nerve impulse, is taking it down. Once the dendrite receives those messages, it triggers that impulse to move. The impulse then travels down the long tail of the neuron, called the axon, to the other end of the neuron. At that end of the neuron are axon terminals. The nerve impulse tells the axon terminals to release or not release little message packages, which are called neurotransmitters. To reach the next neuron, the neurotransmitters must cross a tiny, tiny space called the synapse. Okay, so this is a more detailed view of the structure of the neuron. And as you can see, again, we see the cell body, which has the hair-like follicles that are the dendrites. Those are the ones that receive the messages that are then moved through the axon by the neural impulse onto the other end of the neuron through the myelin sheath into the terminal branches of the axon. Okay, so real quick, let's do a really fast poll. And the question is, how many neurons do you think your brain has? How many neurons do you think your brain has? How many connections do you think each neuron can have? Okay, so let's just launch the poll. Just give me a second and I will launch it. And you have 3 choices as responses, okay? So here we are. How many neurons does your brain have? The first one is 10 million, 10 billion, or 100 billion. Which one do you think? Let's see, Natasha, there's a lot of responses coming in. Oh, we have a lot of responses. Keep them coming. A few more seconds. Make sure
Yes, we
everyone
have
votes.
40%.
Mm-hmm.
40% have voted.
Yep. Want to give everybody an opportunity. Just think real quick and choose your best response. All right. I think we're going to close in 1, 2, and 3. All right. We're going to close the poll. Thank you all for participating. And now I'm going to share it so everyone can see what the response was. Look at that.
Yes, 10%.
10% said 26. That was 10 million and 10 billion got
Yeah, the
neck and neck.
same.
Interesting,
Neck and neck.
26%, and 49% got 100 billion.
Billion.
Okay. So how many neurons does your brain have? And how many connections can each neuron have? So how many total brain connections? Okay, so let's think about that. The brain is made up of around 100 billion neurons with a B. So those of you who picked 100 billion, ding, 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 you are correct. That's
Yes,
about the same as
that's
the
a lot.
number, yeah, it's about the same as the number of trees in the Amazon rainforest. Think about that. And each neuron then is connected to around 10,000 others. So the actual number of connections in your brain is about the same as the number of leaves in the rainforest, not trees, but leaves, which is about 1,000 trillion with a T. How is that?
Yeah,
Can you even wrap your head around that? That is unreal. That is
100 trillion. Yes.
that's happening in our brains as we speak. You didn't even feel it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for participating. Thank you for participating. Okay, so let's continue. All right, so how do those impulses travel across the synapse? So the neurotransmitters cross the synapse to the dendrites to the next nerve cell. Remember, so they're communicating that way. They're sending messages. So the neurotransmitters that one neuron sends to the next neuron tell it to either pass the impulse or message along to the next cell or to stop there. The impulse or mesa travels most smoothly down the axon from the cell body to the axon terminals when it is insulated by a fatty material called the myelin sheath. The axon serves as the pathway. The myelin sheath keeps the impulse on the path so it doesn't escape and also helps the signal to move faster. The more insulated the axon is by the myelin sheath, the more accurately and quickly the message is sent. Now, how does the brain and the neurons know how to do this? That's what I want to know. So now we're going to talk about the naptogenesis. And I believe that was a term used in that video, was it not, Natasha?
Yes.
Hmm. Okay, so
Adaptogenesis.
yeah, it is the creation of connections between neurons or synapse formation. So the neurons that communicate with each other more often form stronger connections across their synapse. Neurons need to connect with other neurons to perform a particular function, such as hearing or smelling something. These connections can cross short distances in the brain or very long distances across the brain, or still longer distances in the brain down the spinal cord. So, how does a neuron know which other neurons to connect with? How does it know? How does the brain know to do any of this stuff? Guess what? Through experiences and the environment. So, a developing neuron responds to neurotransmitters and other signals in the environment which help guide its path. Some neurons have specific functions. For example, the motor neurons in our bodies drive our muscles. As a child learns to crawl or walk, connections between neurons in the brain, the motor neurons in the body, and the muscles they target strengthen and grow more efficient with practice. Other neurons, such as neurons in our eyes that sense light, or those in our noses that sense smell, fine tune their connections based on the stimulation they received from the environment. So the same is true of neurons in the regions of the brain that process language and identify faces rather. As a child has experiences and receives sensory information from the environment, the brain fine tunes connections between neurons that help us learn a language or identify a familiar face. So the more often the child has a particular experience, then the stronger the connections will be in her brain. This is true of both positive and negative experiences. Okay, so as child care providers, this is important. This is true for both positive and negative experiences. For example, if an adult responds with eye contact and words when a baby coos, the connections in the brain that process language are being strengthened. If a baby is shouted at every time she cries, then of course the connections in her brain that process fear are strengthened, which means she is likely to expect to be shouted at and experience fear when she cries to communicate her needs. So that is why it's so important that we provide positive experiences. Again, the experiences that children have affect the actual structure of their brain. In other words, brains are built through experiences. This is why it's so important for us to be mindful in our interactions with the children at all times. The experiences we provide must be positive in order to ensure that we're supporting that healthy brain development, that we are building strong brains through strong, positive experiences. All right, so moving along to neuroplasticity. Now, you may have heard it said that the brain is more plastic in early childhood. Well, what exactly does that mean? It actually refers to the ability of the brain to modify itself and adapt to new experiences in the environment. Our brains have the greatest plasticity at the beginning of life, and it decreases as we age. This also means that the child's environment in the first years of life has a very significant impact on how the brain develops and functions. So because infants are learning so much and establishing so many new connections between neurons, they have a great deal of flexibility or neuroplasticity in their brains. And as we age, our brain doesn't make as many new connections. The plasticity of our brain is not as great as children to learn new things, like a new language, for example, which is considerably more difficult for us when we are adults. And so neuroplasticity is really like building a house when you think about it. You start with the foundation and other critical infrastructure like wiring, plumbing, and weight-bearing walls before you paint and add decorative touches. So because of the plasticity of the brain in early childhood and the fact that children's experiences in the world shape how their brains develop, the way that we interact with children in our care is then critically important. The quality and timing of the experiences we provide for them can affect that structure of their brain, again, for years to come. So the brain's development unfolds in what is called a hierarchical order. And that means that the networks that are forming in the brain begin with the most critical functions for survival in the world, such as seeing and hearing. And then we move on to more complex functions, such as mathematics or complex problem solving. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the types of timing of experiences that influence the networks of neurons and their functions. So when we talk about neuroplasticity, there are generally two types. One is experience expectant and experience dependent. Okay, so we're going to talk about what each one of them is. Experience expectant neuroplasticity refers to connections being made in the brain that form based on exposure to experiences that most people or animals would have in their environment. So normal brain growth and development require exposure to these experiences. The brain is actually expecting these types of experiences. So for example, exposure to light through the eye is then essential for developing vision, okay? So again, experience expectant neuroplasticity describes the normal generalized development of neuron connections that occur as a result of common experiences that all humans are exposed to in a normal environment. Again, these are universal experiences like visual stimulation, sound, specifically voices, and body movement as well. So the brain then develops through evolution to expect these early stimulation experiences and uses them to activate particular synapses that are involved in senses like vision and hearing. If everything is normal, then the brain will develop in an expected fashion. But if something has happened that inhibits the perception of these experiences, then development can be stunted or halted altogether. So another example of this is when vision is obstructed in an infant and they are unable to perceive the expected visual information the brain needs to form the synapses necessary um, to the proper functioning of the visual system. Although the infant started out with the required synapses to be able to see, they were pruned away because the brain failed to perceive the visual stimulation. And on the same note, overstimulation, while we're talking about stimulation, overstimulation of visuals or sounds are not really the best for early childhood environment, right? We know that when we play loud music without intention or purpose, or if we are overly decorating our walls with too much display, then this can possibly overstimulate the child and cause, hyperactivity in children sometimes. So if you have an experience in that aspect, you're welcome to share that in the chat box. Okay, so let's continue. So experience now dependent neuroplasticity. Okay, so the second one refers to changes in the brain's connections that happen only if the child receives the environmental stimuli to build those connections. The brain takes in these new experiences, which trigger new connections. These are experiences that some people may have, but others may not. Okay, so again, it refers to the brain's capacity to change in response to those experiences. Okay, could be learning, could be environmental changes or cues. So experience-dependent neuroplasticity is what allows us to learn and adapt to our environment, basically. Scientists used to think that experience-based neuroplasticity stopped after early childhood, but they now know that this is not true. While the brain does become less plastic as we age, it does not stop. We can continue learning and adapting to our environment way into adulthood. So, for example, children living in an agricultural farm community develop awareness of weather patterns and the responses of animals in ways that children growing up in urban environments would not. Another example is that children grow up in a harsh, abusive homes, then they learn to become vigilant to threat or danger in ways that children growing up in secure homes would not. So those are two examples of experience-dependent neuroplasticity. So now we're going to look at a video, and this video is called Discover How to Rewire Your Brain with Neuroplasticity. So we looked at already the different parts of the neuron and how it moves through impulses and how it travels across the synapses. And so as we look at this video, I invite you to take notes and anything interesting that you might catch that you would like to share in the chat box. We encourage you to do that. We'll talk a little bit after the video to see what you think. Okay, so I'm going to share it. All right. So how about that, everyone? What did you think about that video? Okay, so it started off kind of recapping what we learned so far about neuroplasticity and those connections in the brain, but then it kind of turned towards something else. And I really like the message that this video is giving us. So it talks about how synaptic pruning doesn't really stop. As in adulthood, human brain still continues to shed and strengthen those connections throughout our lives, right? And so we have a way of changing and rewiring our brains. And I really like some of the examples that they gave. So kind of putting away those negative thoughts and negative attitude and kind of becoming more positive. So process, good information and kind of shed away that bad information. What do you think about that video, Natasha?
It is a great view, especially with what we are going through during this day and age with the pandemic and everything else. It provides us with tools that how we are able to access the power of neuroplasticity to change our thinking and what we use, we strengthen. What we don't use, we lose, right? So it
Absolutely.
much provide us with not only when we look at children, we as an adult, also we need to have a strong mindset in order to be able to provide and cultivate the brain of young children. So if our mindset is not fit, is not set, so we will be unable to really do the work that we're supposed to do, that is building the brain, right?
Exactly. Well said. So when we're talking about enriching these children's lives and making sure that we're providing those positive experiences to help build their brain, right, at such a young age, it really
Yes.
is important that we do take time, we challenge ourselves, and we do take time to spend, we limit our time rather endorsing those negative thoughts and maximizing those feelings, right? Those positive feelings
Yes.
and beliefs that will make us a better person. So definitely meditation, pursuing new experiences in life, freeing ourselves from past attachments and perceptions, and really kind of using our imagination to access our highest potential. So we want to challenge each and every one of our attendees tonight to kind of do that and look at yourselves and see how you can become a better person for yourself and for the children in your care. All right, so excellent. Any comments or thoughts, just put them down in the chat box, okay?
And one of the handout we have, Anna on there, it talks about how the brain is like an army uh,
Yes.
that functions, and
Mhm.
how we provide that information and how they work regardless of us telling them. So we have to take the time to really feed our brain and do the things that we need to do in order to keep that great tool that we have healthy and
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, there's a handout called How to Harness Neuroplasticity with
yes.
Enthusiasm. It's very interesting. So we invite you definitely to download those handouts so you can have them accessible later. Okay. So thank you all. I hope you enjoyed that video as much as we did. All right. So let's take a quick brain break, as we call it. Okay. Um, in the web, there's tons of really cool tests and brain teasers that we like to use. This particular one I like. For to some of you, it may be familiar. You may have seen it already, but it is a challenge to your mental viability and flexibility. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to just kind of humor us and follow along. So this is a you look at the little panel, and of course, there's words written there describing colors. So what we want to do is we want to say aloud what color we see, the color that we see in every word, but not the word that is written. In other words, the color that it's highlighted in the word. So starting from left to right, from top to bottom. Okay, so ready, set, go. Let's see how, how fast you can do it.
Red, white, green,
Red, white,
brown, green, red. brown, white, red, brown,
No, it's
green,
white.
this
It's so
brown, green, red.
red, white, green, brown, white, green. Ooh, that's hard. It's hard to say it fast. It's even hard to say it slow. I don't know about you guys. But so it's not easy, right? So this test is called a Stroop test, and I found it on the web in a page called Sharp Brains. They really have some cool information there. I invite you to kind of Google it. It's really cool. And this type of test is used in psychological evaluations actually to measure mental viability and flexibility. So since performing well requires strong attention, inhibition, and self-regulation capability, it is also known as the executive function test. So share with us how well you did and how easy or hard that was on the chat. All right, so let's keep it going. All right, so now my colleague Natasha was going to take over the presentation, and we're going to listen now about time-sensitive and critical periods in brain development.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you for that exercise, that brain exercise, the Stroop test.
Woke you up, right? Woke you up, right?
Yes, it did. Got me focused.
Excellent.
Um, so now we are heading down to timing sensitive and critical period. Now, so we know that timing of when a person is exposed to certain environment, stimuli can affect the development of the neural connections. Scientists have identified that some areas of the development have windows of time that closes more quickly than others, right? And often that is called the critical period. While the other part that stays open longer, often called sensitive period. So we're going to talk about the difference between critical and sensitive period. Looking at this slide, you see the timing sensitive critical period. It continues and you see the parts of the brain and the clock. So we do know that timing sensitive period begins at the and end more gradually and represent the optimal time for maximum change. Although change can occur after the sensitive period ends, it just requires more effort. There's a study that there's an animal study that was taking place that shows that there are certain windows of time during which a young are especially sensitive to their environment and are expecting certain input. For example, a newborn mice must experience normal whiskers sensation in the first few days of life, or they will fail to develop normal sensitivity to touch in their faces. Cats, on the other hand, must be exposed to normal visual input during the first 3 months of life, or their vision will be impaired. Monkeys need consistent social contact during the first 6 months of their life, or they will be extremely emotionally disturbed. So looking at this, we understand the importance of time sensitive, how it is important to provide those experiences in order for those period, for the in order not to cause impairment to a certain part of the body. So we continue with the sensitive period is the window opportunity for children to, and it is a critical period. The critical period have more distinct window of time when they start and stop. After the time period ends, the window of opportunity for those skills to develop closes. So it's a lost opportunity for that child or for that experience to be mastered. Many of the same period appears to hold human development, although we are less certain about the exact length. Babies require normal visual input, just like we say the mice, just like we say that cat does need that. Babies also need to have that visual input to light. Otherwise, it will cause visual impairment in children. And so therefore, children born with crossed lazy eyes will fail to develop sharp vision and depth perception if the problem is not promptly corrected. When it comes to language skills, again, we see that language skills depend on the verbal input. For children who are who have hearing impaired, it requires sign language. And the first few years of development of certain skills, particularly grammar and pronunciation, without this input, language development may be permanently affected. The critical period for language learner begins around about 5 years old and ends around puberty. So that is why it is said that children who learn a different language within that time, it's easier. But after puberty, if children who learn a second language after puberty, they tends to have a foreign accent. This is a more clear slide where you see all three areas start at birth: the seeing, hearing, receptive language, and higher cognitive functioning. So the hump that happens during hearing, the critical period of time period ends, and then it continues, but the higher cognitive function continues on to teenage year. So the critical period in the development of brain function is are some of the development that we think they are more sensitive period. Sensitive period are the time and development when the brain region is most open to learning and referring to particular skills or brain functions. Many new connections between neurons are formed during sensitive period, and unneeded ones are eliminated. A process called pruning. We saw the video of that also talked about the pruning, which is the process where you use it, you lose it. So it's a different part of the brain have different sensitive period based on these region of the brain and developing them and maturing. For example, early in life, the sensory region of the brain have bursts of synaptic growth. During the early month of life, sensory region are being refined, and as baby are flooded with the sensory experiences, many new connections are forming between neurons and sensory region of the brain and body. Following the peak of the synaptic development and the sensory region of the brain, there is a period of great synaptic growth in the language region of the brain. Sorry. And following this period of language development, it is an even longer period that continues on into the cognitive function that requires the higher thinking skill until teenage years. So how does that look like and sensitive during those sensitive period? Neuroscientists do not yet fully understand the biological basis of these critical sensitive periods, so there's not set time that they know of. However, one theory is that they correspond to a period of synaptic excesses of the brain, as described earlier. There is staggering numbers of brain connection being made in the early years, about 1 million new connections per second. In fact, the brain actually overproduces connections some 50% more than will be preserved into adulthood. In this sense, a baby's brain is more densely packed with neuron connection than the brain of an adult. But having lots of neural connection isn't the goal. Remember, it's how many connection that occurs that cause the brain to operate inefficiently. Rather, it is the optimal number of connection that allows the brain to do what it needs to do for a child to function well in his or her environment. This is why experience it plays an important role in brain development. During the critical and sensitive period, a child's experience sensory, motor, emotional, and intellectual determine which of these synapses will be preserved. The least used one is the loses connection and prone or eliminated. Now, looking at this chart, you'll see side-by-side comparison of the sensitive period versus critical period. So the sensitive period during the period where there is specific time when the biological event is more sensitive to environmental stimuli. The start and end is a gradual timing, gradually. And then the period to maximize is sensitive. So for example, we talked about it earlier, one of the example is the skill that can be learned is language. So we know that language is important, that we maximize that time by providing experience. And the critical period is when the yellow is before pruning, right? And then to the left. So to the right is after pruning. So it's a critical period referred to the finite period in which an organism has heightened sensitivity to external stimuli that are compulsory for development in particular skills. It is an abrupt time frame, and that's the example of the eye that we gave earlier, that within the period of time that a child is supposed to have exposure to light, and if it doesn't happen, it will cause vision impairment and so forth to that child. So you might say, oh, but we're going to say, what is pruning? Pruning is, we've been talking about pruning the whole time. So pruning is the process in which neural circuits are refined. Neural circuits are refined. So looking at this at birth, you see circuits that are within the birth, and then at 6 years old, you see a lot of connectivity that happens, and then from 6 years old to 14 years old, you notice there's a change in the connection that you are able to see. So less connection or less neurons are showing. That's the pruning process. Whatever you don't use, you lose. Whatever you use, it gets connected to stronger connection. And at 14 years of age, you see the difference in the neuron connections. Pruning allows brain circuits to run more efficiently. Early experiences affect the natural and quality of the brain development architecture by determining which circuits are retained and which are pruned through the lack of use. And this way, each child's brain becomes better tuned to meet the challenge for his or her particular environment. Overproduction of synapses peaks in early childhood between 5 and 6 years old. Excessive synapses are removed by pruning, which peaks in the adolescence stage, but it continue into adulthood. So pruning does not stop at adolescence or a teenage year, as we saw from the video before. It continues into adulthood. As you can see, during the early years of the brain development, the foundation of the architecture of the brain architecture will be strong or fragile. This is why research believes that early childhood, particularly the first years of life, is prime opportunity for positive influence in the course of a person's life. The positive relationship, the positive experiences, that's what shape the brain of our lives. Again, it's another picture of the before pruning, what happened with the connection. And to the left, that's the after pruning, which is the stronger connection between neurons and axons. Now, we're going to have please take a minute to think about what happened. Let's use the daily routine as an experience to what is it that happened within your daily routine of your care with either as a parent or as a caregiver. Provide us with an example. For example, I would say what happened during bedtime, either at home or during nap time at school. So what are the experiences? What are the brain the challenges or the things that happens during those routine time that can tell you about the child for you to adjust or to know what's going on? For example, during routine time of bedtime, what happened? How does the child feel? What happened before? How do you take the child from coming from outside and transitioning the child into the nap time or into bedtime? What is it, the conversation that you are having with the child prior to that experience? How's the child feeling within that time of that transition? Things that are going on around the environment to make that child feel, okay, this is the time, and then we are settling down, we are putting down the music, and then we are preparing for that routine to take place. So in the chat box, go ahead and share with us, and what are your experience in transitioning a child into a routine, and what areas of the brain you think you are stimulating. Okay, so let's see. On the chat, let's see what you guys are saying.
Okay, so I see that some children enjoy nap time, so they're eager to go to nap.
Okay.
Some children don't like napping, in
Yes.
my experience.
Yes.
So they might not be that willing, right, to
And,
transition to that
and they
particular
might not have,
activity of the
they
day.
may not be ready,
Yeah,
and energy that they have inside, they may not have fully let go of all those energy and still want to play. Right?
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Some of them might get angry even, right?
Yes.
Again, it depends on the age of the child, but sometimes it's a good point that they can't communicate that they're upset and they don't want to stop playing like you just said, and so they might get upset and throw a tantrum or you start crying, right?
Yes. So a lot a lot has going on with the process of the routine throughout the day. So throughout the day, there's a lot of experiences that is positive experience time that we, whether it be nap time, whether it be lunch, the conversation that we are having, whether it be change on the changing table, whatever experience that we are having, a lot is happening in the brain. So therefore, building on those experiences and is what we are asking to for providers or for parents to be aware of what's going on in the brain within that time of routine experiences.
Right. So routines that happen and then how the children feel and what's
Yes.
going on in the environment, right? Around them, what's happening during that time. And again, so we're thinking about all the different activities we do throughout the day with the kids. So this is just a snapshot during nap time, that it's a busy time usually. So we decided to kind of highlight that particular time of the day to kind of see, we'll put ourselves in the child's shoes and position and see, so what's going
Understand.
on? What is the child going through, right?
Yes. So again, looking at the routine that would happen, think about an example of what the child might feel, understanding individualized for each child. We know some children don't like to take nap, and it may require that you take them outside and give them some extra time in order for them to burn that energy before taking nap, or light. A lot of the centers, you have to have the light on, and it could be a child who has, when napping at home, the lights are have to be off, and therefore the light is kind of like a bothersome experience for them to go and take naps while the lights are on. Different, so it's just individualizing, understanding what's going on, and when a child begins to fuss, so we will understand what's causing, getting to know the child, and maybe provide with the ones with the light, provide a softer light or playing music to calm them down and to lower the child expectation.
Exactly.
So we only took one example, that was the nap time example. So we can see that we have a lot that happened during that routine. So think about all the other activities that happen throughout the day, the routines that, and all these network are working together to create what is right for that particular child. Think of all the rest of the activities throughout the day that and how many positive experience you've created for that child to make that connection for that particular activity, whether it be routine or transitioning a child from one activity to the next. We know that neurons that communicates with each other often form stronger networks. So think about that when you are creating experiences for the children in your care. Now, what providers can do, like we briefly said, like understanding the part of the brain and how they communicate with each other is all very important. It's to know that, but how do we apply that to our daily activities or the daily experiences that we are providing to children? That's what we are asking to really think about. One very important way we apply is by being realistic about expectation for children in your care, knowing that infants are brains are just now getting developed. It's not fully developed. So for the attention span for an infant and a toddler varies. So we wouldn't keep a toddler in a large group reading experience because we know that it's not age appropriate for that toddler. And another important way is that we apply it is by nearly aware of the importance of our interaction with children and the kind of experiences we provide them, because we are helping them build foundation of their brain architecture. So we see providers, parents, caregivers as architecture. We are building the children's brain. So they will build connection through their experiences with us, and they will take with them forever. So that is why it's emphasized that the experiences are positive experiences that will connect, that will make the connection, and the neurons then building that brain capacity. And the following units of the next unit, we will talk about the curriculum. We will talk deeply in the how positive early experience with caregiver and provider like you can enhance the development of healthy brain, maximizing a child's ability to develop strong language, cognitive, social, emotional, and physical skills that set them up for success academically and socially far into the future. And I love this slide because it shows different experiences. It shows different experience where the adults are present. The adults are present and at the child's level, and interaction, positive interactions are happening. So children are not only making the connection, but also learning about relationship and building relationship and making those connection. For the outdoor experience, the adult is close to the child, and then they play, taking part into the play. All these experiences are experiences that's providing connection and making connection to children while the experiences are happening. They look to be positive. Even with the baby that's laying, you don't see the adult, but you can see, you can imagine that there's an adult on right above that picture talking and having that conversation, or cooing and going the back and forth and the smiling and all that experiences within those pictures. This is a handout that a good resource that we have on the handout for you, that you, as a provider or parent, that you can use, that provides you with experience activities that you can do with children, and to build on those muscles, to build on those neurons, and experiences for children. So you can download it now. Don't wait till later. Just go ahead and download it so you can use it later at your leisure. But it's a great resource that you'll find useful. Now we're about to watch this video, and it's titled, "This is how your brain grows." Um, it recap everything that we talked about from Unit 1 to Unit 1A and B. And then let's watch it. Take note. If anything that you want to share, you can share it in the chat box within while watching this video with us. Alrighty. So this video kind of like sum it up. What is it all that we have talked about? How amazing the brain is, and that these neurons connect with other neurons and they communicate as a network, and they control all the thoughts, that feelings, actions that a baby may have, and the ability to create seven. Hello, can you? So about seven new connections are built within the first years of life. So, and we talked about the 100 trillion of connections that happens in the brain. Um, Anything else you want to say, Anna, about the video?
Well, I just find it interesting that all of this, with the baby in the prenatal, everything that's taking place again, how the baby yawns and rests, takes a nap inside the womb. I find that so fascinating. But yeah, I think it's pretty cool, pretty interesting information, I think. And it did sum up pretty much all the topics that we touched on last week and this week.
And
So
I
that was
just wanted to say that by age 6, the brain has reached its 90% of its brain size, almost as an adult size, for those of you who were not here last week. So,
mhm,
so cover that.
excellent.
Mhm. So mental rotation. So due to time, we do have these mental rotation activities, and we ask that you take a picture and try to do them at yourself, to do your brain teaser, and Google the brain teasers online to pretty much have more activities that you can do yourself to kind of like keep the mental state going.
Yeah,
Um,
working memory, working memory.
yes, working
Mhm.
memory, yes.
Mhm.
And
So
this
we
is the next one.
mhm.
Won't be able to do them in person, but go ahead and take a picture of that, and or Google them online, and you'll be able to do that. Um, for the key message, um, the brain is not fully developed at birth. We talked about that. It grows through size and connectivity. The brain grows from the back to the front. Last week we saw that. From the bottom to the top, the brain stem is largely formed at birth, giving us the ability to grow through everyday functions. The forebrain is shaped by experiences and early childhood, and ends responsibly for higher order functions such as thinking, planning, problem solving, sensory processing, emotional regulation, and language development. We play a key role in providing children developmentally appropriate stimulation and responsive caregiving to foster healthy brain growth in early childhood when it is most plastic. And this is our reflection activity. Since we had one, again, we ask that you take a picture of this reflection activity just to, and there's a handout on the handouts section that will allow you to pretty much connect those questions. What type of sensory and physical experience did the child have during nap time routine? And once you go through the the handout, you'll see what type of activity, what type of experience you pretty much provided them, and what part of the brain was really at work during that time. So due to time, we will not be able to go over each one. So we ask that you take a picture of it. And again, it's not a test, it's just to keep you going. So we have a discussion to have the next time we meet, next next session, which will be on the 21st of September.
Right. Do we have time for the video?
It is such a great video, so even if we don't sing the whole thing, so let's play it for about a minute. Yes,
Okay, we'll share it. It's a
yes.
great video.
So let's stand up, get moving, and then drop everything that you have in your hand. And this is a movement.
It's an activity.
Yes.
Here we go. I love it.
I love this video because it says the brain is the boss.
It is
So
the boss.
we say our heart is our boss, but the brain is the boss of our body. So
Absolutely. And as early
yes,
childhood teachers, I think this is so appropriate because we love to get up and dance with the kids. So this is just
yes,
perfect.
yes. So go
Uh,
ahead and take a picture of this slide so you can, if you would like to play it again later on, you can access that YouTube video. And these are the resources that we use, and you can take a picture of the book and do your own research. And we also use some of those books to complete the training, add on to the training that we have with from 0 to 3. Webinar housekeeping, again, click on the orange arrow either to the right or to the left side of your screen. And your certificate will be emailed to you after completing this training. Remember to complete the post test and the evaluation questions, and then in order to get your certificate. Also, now is the time to download if you didn't do it before, go ahead and download the handouts on your computer for later use. We apologize for taking over the time, for going over. Again, my name is Natasha Elise, and my email address is as follows. If you need something to be emailed to you, if you cannot open the handout, please email us, my colleague or myself, Anna Avalos Atkinson, and we will be sure to email it to you.
hmm.
Again, we apologize for taking extra time. If you have any questions and you want to post them on the chat box, please feel free, and we will allow more time to answer them.
All
Thank you.
right. Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for sticking with us tonight. Again, it's a lot of information, but we hope that it was engaging and interesting for you. And we hope to see you again. Hope to have you join us on the 21st
The
of September, and we'll
21st.
start Unit
Yes.
2. All
Yes,
right.
and it's going to be the curriculum, more of the curriculum.
Exactly. Okay, so everyone get ready because we're going to do more interesting things.
Do we
Unit
have
2
any
again,
questions?
the factors affecting brain growth and development. Let me see. I don't think I see any questions in the chat. Nope. Pretty much everyone is thanking us for the information and that they love the video. So awesome. All right. Well, then we wish all of you a good night and we hope to see you again. Thanks again for coming, everyone.
Thank you.
All righty. Thanks, my friend.
Thanks. Have a good one.
All right. Good night.
Good night.